We talked about this just after 4 o'clock, a new poll out by Leger, which shows that a majority of Canadians, 67% according to this poll, think everything in Canada is broken. Echoing the exact same phrase that Pierre Poilievre has been using for the past couple of weeks, and it seems that catchphrase has either caught on or something we didn't think was going on up until he said it is in fact actually happening. Andrew ENNS is an executive vice president of Leger's Central Canada operations. He's also lead researcher for this particular data. He's on the line right now. Thank you, Mr. ENNS, for your time today.
Thanks for having me on, Aaron. Good to join you guys.
Yeah, let's start by talking about the first of all, the methodology involved here. I'm kind of curious as to why you asked this question to begin with.
You know, it stemmed from a conversation a small group of us, were having in terms of some different topics that we could investigate public opinion. And it's one that's popped up, I think, a few times over the year in terms of just different points where all of a sudden we're bombarded in the media with things that we would normally take for granted, just not working. Traveling just before Christmas, it seemed that was just the biggest adventure in the world, and getting home from a destination seemed next to impossible. Earlier in the summer, it was passports or lost luggage at some of the bigger airports. So it's just a reoccurring, a bit of a theme, a kind of a conversation point, and we thought with healthcare stuff that we're hearing lots about, we thought, maybe there's something to it. And I will say, there's one of us in the group, not myself, was fairly active in Twitter, and he said, you see the tweet every now and then, a la Mr. Poilievre, in terms of, everything feels broken. And so one thing led to another.
Okay.
And then I'm curious specifically about the findings that it seems more women say that they are angry, and they say that they report that Canada is broken at a higher rate than men. Can you tell us a little bit about those findings? It's so interesting.
Well, for sure. And it was interesting, certainly to us when we looked at the results. I think, though, when I step back and think about it, in other research that we've done, we are seeing that when it comes to some of the affordability challenges, the impact of rising inflation, the complaints about grocery food prices, the worries about making ends meet, we do see that being more acute amongst women. And I think in part because I think women are still very, very involved in sort of those day-to-day household operations and some of those decisions. And I think they're feeling the changes maybe more acutely than I might say men are. And then the other point I'll make, Natasha, is that healthcare is also an issue that cuts more closely for women than it does for men. And I think we're seeing that issue a lot. And we're hearing a lot about long waits, and in particular, some of the issues around pediatric care that was just before Christmas and over Christmas, where it seems to be, some of the struggles there. And so I think some of these issues maybe are a bit more acute, and therefore the sentiment may be a little stronger amongst women than maybe we anticipated.
I think one of the other parts of this that's interesting is the fact we would have all assumed in seeing results of the survey like this that it would have been older Canadians who would have been the ones to simply say, we think it's all broken and we were here before, things were better before. It's not. Your survey shows it's younger Canadians, in fact.
Yeah, again, sort of along similar lines with maybe the surprise when it came to gender. We do see the same, I had the same feeling as you, Aaron, that I thought, well, okay, it'll be the older, kind of the grumpy old man sort of thing. And it turns out that younger Canadians, 18 to 34, actually are expressing sort of this everything feels broken or a bit higher on the anger quotient. And I think in part, and it's an issue that we've been hearing a lot about, is the ability to buy a house, and some of these affordability issues that when you think of a 25, 30-year-old and making those big life decisions, we've heard lots of conversation around these things are becoming, they're out of reach. And in some markets, I don't know about Montreal, but I know certainly in some markets, it's actually infiltrating into even being able to rent a decent apartment is getting hard to reach. And those are really prominent activities for that generation and that cohort.
I find myself just wondering if you ask this same group of people, do you think on the whole that Canada is a pretty good place to live, that they also might actually respond yes. I mean, obviously you can't guess on that, but what's your feeling on it?
My gut would say I think you're probably right, and I'll be honest. Sometimes in the coverage of our in our poll, sometimes the things got a little bit shorthanded in terms of, Canada is broken, and I might be kind of guilty in that. I think it's more to be fair. The statement was, "Do you feel things in Canada are broken?" And I don't know if that's a statement that says, I don't know if Canada is broken. I think it's still, as you would say, I think if we asked, would you choose to live anywhere else? I think you'd still get a large number. But I think what it points to is that I think people are just a bit disappointed how things currently are going and kind of expect better.
It's interesting, though, as I read the story on the survey, to note that, and I think we said this in our question, if this was a Google review or a Yelp review and they were this uniformly bad, there'd be serious reason for concern. But of course, we're not in an election cycle, at least yet. Have you ever seen anything like this before, where people seem so angry, 67% of people, at a government in power?
I can't say from sort of the public opinion standpoint, but I do still have a few recollections of sort of going back to, I'd say, early 90s when the GST came in. I think there was some pretty strong hostility to the, I think then it was the progressive conservative government at the time. I think there's probably some, back then there was some pretty good groundswell, and it might even be probably more back then. Mm-hmm. I think you're right. I don't know whether or not there's any sort of need to sort of pull the fire alarm in terms of, what does this mean for an election, whether it's federal or provincial. I think where it does send a signal is that if you view for government, this is the opinion of your customers. Mm-hmm. It's not a great, it's not good right now. If you're a business and that's if you these are your customers, you need to take note and you need to probably do better. And I think that's kind of the challenge for government right now is that, people aren't happy. So what are we going to do?
Yeah, I think as important, this word that I keep seeing here, which is angry, typically you ask someone you're not happy with something, that are unhappy, but half the people you surveyed actually said when you asked them how things were being managed, they used that word, right? They used the word angry.
Exactly. It was 50%. And the interesting thing there, Aaron, was when you look at, I like looking at sometimes within those questions, some of those intensity measures. So we had an option as very happy, and we had an option at the other end of the scale, very angry. 4% said they were very happy, and 20% said they were very angry. 20% is a minority, don't get me wrong, but it's still a lot of people. And I think, again, that's the challenge for policymakers and governments of all levels, is to say, hey, you know what? We've got to take the edge off of this. We've got to find a way to turn the temperature down a bit, because it's hard to have a good public policy debate when people are angry. Like they're not really in a listening frame of mind.
Sure. I also find myself thinking, though, Andrew, so much about the power of suggestion, right? Like if you hear over and over again that everything is broken and that people are angry, then you kind of get on board. Yeah, I'm angry too. I'm wondering about sort of the provincial breakdown. Did you see much of a disparity from one coast to the next as to how angry people are?
Well, there was a little bit. Like we did see, we saw sort of on the anger question, for example, we saw things pop up a bit in Alberta. And a bit lower in British Columbia and Quebec and Ontario. The prairies were on the high. So Western Canada, for example, 54% angry versus Eastern Canada, 47%.
As you might
expect. So
there's
some distinction there.
But so it sounds like everybody's angry, but just some people are a little more angry.
Exactly, a little bit. And, I think when you look at the Western Canada, what stokes that a little bit is that you add in, I think, a bit of friction on the energy file. Ottawa's, it's been, not that well kept secret. There's some, there's a bit of animosity between Ottawa and Alberta, and maybe that infiltrates some of these feelings
You
as well.
think? Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I would just say when we asked this question earlier on in the show, Andrew, someone had a great text which simply said, let's ask this or take this survey again after the long, cold winter. Let's do it in the spring and see what happens then. So maybe keep that in mind. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining me in your program. First time. Thanks, guys.
Happy to
Thanks,
have you
Andrew.
here. Andrew ENNS over at Leger Marketing on this poll that shows that 67% of Canadians think everything in Canada is broken.
But there's something to that texter that said, at this time of the year, in the doldrums of February, we're pretty pessimistic in general.
See how we are in April, May.
Spring, yeah, exactly.